Hi, my name is Dina. I'm back today with another video for PotomacBeads. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make my Soaring High Earrings. We're going to be using some Athenacast teardrop forms. We're going to be using some Miyuki seed beads in different sizes, as well as some Miyuki Delicas to make something that looks like a hot air balloon. So gather up your list of supplies, or your supplies from that list that's listed down below. Meet me back and I'll show you what to do. Okay, to start off our earrings, we will need our thread, which I'm using dragon thread size 8. I'm using the black today only because I have this motif that looks almost like a watermelon. At least that's the colors that I chose. So if you see a little bit of black thread, then it kind of makes sense because it would look almost like the seeds in the watermelon. So I'm using the black thread, plus I have my little black basket down here for my hot air balloon. So we'll start off with our form, and we'll need some 8/8 seed beads. 24 of them will go around our form. And then after we get done with that, we'll do our second row of brick stitch around the form, and then we'll fill in the form itself. Then we'll do a second little portion where I'll show you how to do the basket in peyote stitch with delicas. So like I said, to start off with, we'll need our form, our dragon thread, size 8. I have a wingspan of dragon thread on there, so it's a little over 5 feet, about 5.5 feet or so of thread. You don't have to start off with that, but it usually gets through the majority of the earring, actually, with that one size thread, or that one length of thread. So it just depends on if you like to add thread to your projects or not. And depends on what you're comfortable with what you want to start off with. So to begin with this, I have tied one end of the thread to the form, and just overhead knot, so right over left, left over right, just to make sure that it's secure. And I've got the knot down towards the point. I have just a little bit left over, so that way it's a little easier for me to hold on to. Now, if you've never done brick stitch before, you always start off brick stitch with 2 beads. So I put 2 of the 8/0s on my needle. You want to wrap these beads around the form. To do that, I'm going to go from the bottom part of the form towards the top. I'm going to, as best I can, hopefully you can see it, but I'm going to try to hold on to the beads and make sure that once the beads come down to the form, that the beads just kind of sit on top of my finger. Now the thread is still underneath the form right now and coming out through the middle of the form. Now what you want to do is you want to go back through the second bead that you added. So here's the first bead that we added. Here's the second bead. So you want to go back through that second bead, going towards the outer portion, going away from the form. Now I'm just holding everything together. I know it's kind of hard to see right now, but I'm holding everything together. Now you can see the beads. That second bead has 2 threads through it, and one of the, it's all wrapped around the form. Now when you pull tight, your beads come together, similar to that. And now you have your first 2 beads on. Now, until we get to adding that second layer, you just add 1 bead at a time. So put 1 bead on, go underneath your form towards the center, pull that bead, or pull that thread through. Try to keep your bead to where it's sitting on top of your finger, but not going through the form. It's still sitting on the outside of the form. And then go through the bead again, just making sure you're not going underneath the form again. If you go underneath the form again and the thread's not wrapped around the form, then your bead will just fall off, and you know that you went underneath the form again by accident. So there's bead number 3. I'll do one more with you, a little bit faster. So 1 bead under the form. Try to hold it as best you can, and then go back through it, the bead, making sure that your thread is around the form. There you go. So like I said, you need 24 for these. What you'll end up having is your beads will be And bring the other earring back around again. So your beads will be closer to each other down here at the tip. That's what you're looking for. So that way we can add this little section down here and they'll be close to each other. If they're not that close, it's not the end of the world. We'll figure it out and we'll make it work. So get to that point and meet me back and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've got one more of my 8/0 beads to add. So I'm going to add this last one and you can see how much room that we have. We have very little room, which is fine because we do want that last bead to stick out just a little bit. So we can add in our next step. So I'm going through the last one and adding that on. And there we go. So now our beads are very close to each other down there at the bottom. So now we're going to add our little, I guess it's called a firebox. I'm not quite sure if that's really what it is, but that's what our little bicone is for. Now this is completely optional. You don't have to have an orange bicone or a yellow or a red. This just, to me, just made it look like it, you know, had a little bit of a fire sitting there like you see in hot air balloons. So like I said, it's optional. You don't have to have that. So if you don't have an orange, yellow, or red bicone, perfectly fine. You can use another 8/0 if you want to. If you have a color and that's that one, you can leave this completely out. It's a fun part. So if you're doing this portion, then this is what you'll end up doing. I have my 11/0s out here on the left, and then I have my 15s on the right. So I'm picking up a 15, an 8, or 11/0, then my bicone, and another 15. We're going to bring these all the way down. Well, maybe. Oh, that bicone's too stuck. Not the bicone. That 15 has got too much of coating in it, and it's not allowing me to go through it. So we're going to try this again. Okay, those work. And my 15 is running off the mat. Okay, yeah, those work. So again, it was a 15, 11/0, a bicone, and another 15. Pull that down to the end of the thread. We're going to go back through just the bicone in the opposite direction. So we're going back towards the form now. So go back through just the bicone. I'm holding the bicone in my hand as I'm pulling up. And then we're going to get this to come closer to the form. So that way it sits like that. Now we're going to add another 11/0 and another 15. And then we're going to go from the left-hand side of the point where everything's coming out of. We're going to go across to the other side, the other point. And if you can, just go straight through the original 11/0. No, what is that? That's an 8/0. To where your thread or your needle's coming out of that 8/0. Don't go back into the 15. You can reinforce this if you want, but you really don't have to, because there's really nothing that's going to be sitting there that's going to cause it to be a problem if there's extra tension and things like that. There's really none of that happening. So just kind of play with your beads a little bit until it's sitting about where you want it to sit. And then we can move on to our next round. So on this round, you're going to be continuing the brick stitch. So like we had said in the beginning, you always need to have 2 beads on your needle. Well, in this portion, I'm going to go ahead and add both layers of the green. So you've got the 11/0s, and then you have the 15s that are sticking out in between the 11/0s. So to do that, to start off with, we're going to put an 11, 15, 11. Now to start this row, you're going to go in between your 2 8s, your last 2 8s that you added. So you have your last 8 here, and then this is the second to last 8. Now that bridge thread is where you're going to go underneath. So you get your thread and needle to go underneath the bridge thread, and then pull your beads down to the product, and now your beads sit like that, almost like a picot. You still need to get your thread and needle ready to add some more beads, so you're going to go back up through that very last bead that you added. And when you do that, and you pull tight, your beads are now set on the form in a picot shape, and your thread is coming out that last bead, ready for some more beads to be added. So the next step is what you're going to do for the rest of the form. Add 115 and 111. Go to your next bridge thread underneath the form, going towards you. Pull that down, wrap it around, make sure your thread's going around that bridge thread, and go back through the last bead that you added, which is your 11-0. Pull tight, and there you go. Now eventually you're going to notice that you're not going to be able to add one of these sets, 1, 15, and 11, to each one of the bridge threads, because the 15 or the 11s, excuse me, are smaller obviously than the 8-0s. So you're not going to be able to add one per item. So whenever that happens, all you have to do is go back under that same bridge thread. So here's the second bridge thread that I'm sitting at. When that gets to that point, actually it's going to look better if I do it on the next one. So let me go ahead and finish this one, and then I will show you on the next one. And when I did this the first couple of times for my samples, I did it every 2 or 3. I had to add an extra one to it. Okay, so now is where you're going to add your extra 11-0 and 15-0 on this bridge thread. So this is the bridge thread between the 3rd and the 4th seed bead, the 8-0s. So I'm going to go back under that same bridge thread that I just added that last one to. Pull your beads down, and then go back through that 11-0 again. And now your beads still sit right next to each other. So it still works out, because then here's the bridge thread right here to go through between your 4th and 5th bead. Now don't worry too much about how many of these you're putting around your form. The biggest part that you want to make sure is that here at the top, in order for your earring to sit correctly, this wire guard is going to need to have 2 11-0s to sit in. So count halfway through, so between beads 13 or 12, well, okay, between beads 12 and 13, apparently that's hard for me to say at this point in time, but between beads 12 and 13, you're going to need to make sure that you have an 11-0 sitting in between there, so you can put your wire guard on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So right here, I'm going to have to make sure that I have an 11-0 sitting on this part and 11-0 sitting on this part. I will get to that point here in a second, and I will show you what I'm talking about if you're unclear on what I'm saying, but we need to make sure that we have an 11-0 there. Other than that, it really doesn't matter how many 11-0s and 15s that you put around the edge. It's completely up to you if you want it to look, you know, very bunched together. It really doesn't matter. I never really counted how many I put around, so just get to that point, that center point where you're in between those 2 beads, and come back, and then I will show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's my clarification on what I was trying to say earlier, which I'm not quite sure if it actually came out very, very clearly. So this is my bead number 12 right here of my 8-0, this one right here, and then here's my number 13. So see how I have 2 11-0s sitting in between bead number 12 and 13. That's where your wire guard's going to attach to here in a little while. Once we get to that spot, you'll be putting one part of the wire guard through here and the other one through there. So that's what I was talking about. Just try to make sure that you have one of your brick stitch components sitting in between those 2 beads, so that way you have a good spot to be able to hang your ear wire from, so that way the earring hangs straight on your ear. So that's what I was talking about. Hopefully that made it a little bit more clear. Go ahead and continue around. You want to end up down here on this side, and then once we get to that spot, then I will show you what to do next, because that becomes the fun part, where we get to start adding the beads in the center to make it look more like a watermelon. Okay, so once you get that second row of brick stitch done, you should have something that looks similar to this. So now we're going to add the interior of our watermelon hot air balloon. So I've got my 8/0s back out again, and then now I have a new color of 15s, and they're just black. It's a matte black, I believe is what I had in my stash, so that's what I pulled out. You don't have to use 15s, you can use 11s if you want to on this one. You can use white colored if you want to, because I know some watermelons have white colored seeds in it. You can leave the seeds out completely. This is completely up to you on what you want to do. Same thing with the pattern that's on the inside of this. Now I did do a pattern on the first one. It was just a completely randomized pattern. So I would suggest, there again, that you don't have to do this, but I would suggest that if you do a pattern on one of them, do the opposite pattern on your second one. So on this one, I started off with 2 seed beads down here in the bottom, and then I have 2 seeds, 2 black beads more on the right hand side, and then nothing on the left. So on this one, when I get to that second row, I'll have the 2 seeds, black seeds, on the left hand side and then nothing on the right. So that way it's kind of a mirror image of each other. There again, still don't have to do it that way. You could do it whichever way that you want to. So right now we're coming out of the 11/0, the last 11/0 that you came through, that you added on. So our thread is coming out of that one. So we want to get ourselves wrapped back around, so we're going towards the inner portion of the form, coming through that second 8/0 that's in our line. So here's our first one. Here's our first one, and we want to be coming this direction towards the inner portion of the form through that second one. To do that, we're going to go backwards through our 15. So we're coming out of that first and that last 11 we added. We're going to go back through the 15 that we just added in that last step also. Make sure your thread doesn't go around your little fire down there. Go down the 11 that's sitting to the left of that 15, and then more than likely you can go ahead and go straight through the 8/0 that's sitting below it. And then now you're set up to start adding the beads in the center. Now, like I said, this is completely random. You do not have to follow this pattern, but in this pattern I'm picking up 2 8/0s to start off with. I'm coming out of the right hand side and towards the inner of the form of the second bead. I want to go to the second bead that's on the left hand side and just go through that 8/0. You don't have to worry about going through the 11 or the 15. If you want to, that's fine. You don't have to though. I'm going to show you how it's a little bit easier to do that. So I'm just going just through the 8/0, and then I'm pulling that in. And then that sits the beads in between. Now to get to your third row, you're coming out of your 8/0 on the left hand side right here. We're just going to go straight to the next 8/0 and go towards the inner portion of the form. So it's like that. Whoops. And then that sits the thread in between the 11/0s and the 8/0s. You could see it if you're looking at it really, really, really close, but most people aren't going to see that. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. So like I said, I have my specific pattern. So I'm going to do a 15, 8, 15, and then 2 8s. Now, in order to figure out how many beads that you need to go across, if you don't want to do this specific pattern, just pick up beads in whatever fashion that you want to, whatever way that you want to, and hold them together on your needle like that, and then just set them down where you're going to be setting it on your form. Just set it down there and see if it's big enough. See if it's enough beads, see if it's, what you're looking for. You can always add more beads if you want to. You can add less beads if you want to. It really doesn't matter. My other sample that I made is this one that has the red, yellow, and blue colors, more of the primary colors. And then I added, and it's kind of hard to see because it's really sparkly, but the 2 yellows are sitting here in the beginning, which are 8/0s. My blues are 11/0s. And so I just added a string of blues, and then my reds are 15s, and then I just added a string of 15. So basically that's all I did. I just put beads on my needle like that and then held it up to the form in the place that it's going to be sitting in, and just added beads until it looked good. So really completely up to you. So now we're going to add this section. So we're coming out of that 3rd bead on the left hand side. We need to go through the 3rd bead on the right hand side, going outwards. And then that puts our beads in like that. So our next row is, how about this? I think I'll write it down and then I will show you in just a second. So that way you don't have to watch me just stringing all the beads and everything. I'll write it down on a little piece of paper on what rows that I had, on how many beads that I had on each row, just in case somebody does want to follow the same pattern that I have. So I'll meet you back in just a second with that. Okay, so here's the list of the different rows and everything that I had done on my one earring that I'll be doing on this particular earring. And like I said, if you're wanting to do the same type of thing on both earrings, just a mirror image, then you would just go backwards each row. So go ahead and pause it now if you want to follow this pattern. If not, just move on over to the next section and I will show you what to do next after you get these your beads added. Okay, so once you get your beads on like you would like, whether you're following my pattern or if you're doing a different pattern, completely up to you there again, you should be coming out somewhere around bead 10, maybe bead 11, somewhere around in there of your 8/0s. And again, I'm starting down here and counting around this way. Now remember, we want to try to put our wire guard in between bead 8/0 bead numbers 12 and 13, which would be these 2 11s sitting right here. So we want to move our thread around until we get there. So just depending on which thread that you're coming out of, if I go down bead number 11 and then trying not to get in the middle of my embellishment there in the center, because I was coming out of bead 10, so if I go down bead 11 towards the center, then I can go up bead 12 towards the outer edge, and then, did I catch it? Oh yes, I did. And then I went ahead and I caught the 11/0 there also. That's where I'm going to put my wire guard on. So, wire guard, go up one side, pull it down to the product, go down the other side, and again I always pinch my wire guard just ever so slightly in between my 2 fingers, a thumb and a finger, and that just helps get the thread to go down into the channel a little bit easier. Then you're going to go down your 11/0 on the other side, which is shaking. Okay, there we go. Go down your 11/0. And then pull that in. Just make sure your thread stays in the channel, and then we're going to reinforce that once because we're using the size 8 thread, so probably don't even have to really reinforce it that much because it is the thicker thread and this is the earring. But I'm going to go ahead and do it once more time, and then going down the other side. Whoops, get wrapped around my mouse and my bead mat. Okay, so now your wire guard is on there. So now all you have to do is just tie off. So to tie off, I've already gotten rid of my starter thread where I had tied it to the form. I went ahead and burnt that down. It was getting in the way earlier and it was kind of bothering me, so I just went ahead and got rid of it. So I'm just going to go down the 11/0 and the 8/0 sitting right here. I'm going to go ahead and make a simple knot here, just going underneath that bridge thread that is in between the 8/0 and the form. Form a little circle with your thread. Go through that circle with the needle. You want to try to do that twice. and then pull tight, and then now you have yourself a little knot sitting there. Now all you have to do is just burn that down, and then burn it to the product. And then after you have that done, your knot's in the back of your earring, so you'll never notice it unless somebody decides to turn around your earring. And then our next little section, we will learn how to do this little basket. That way we can, after we get that done, we can attach it to our earring, and we'll have a little hot air balloon earring. It's looking pretty cool so far. Okay, so now we're going to build our little basket. And we're going to do this in peyote. We're going to do 18 rows of 3 beads of peyote. So if you know how to do peyote stitch, then you can get to the next section, and I will show you how to make it into the cup form, so that way it looks more like a basket. It's not perfect, but you know, who's perfect these days? So if you don't know how to do peyote, I'll do a quick little overview. So I have 6 beads on my thread. I'm using a gray color bead, even though my basket is black. I felt like the black may be a little bit hard to see with black thread and then black beads. So I'm just using a gray color of the Delicas that I had in my stash. So put your 6 beads on, bring it down to the end of the thread. And now for peyote, well, if I can hold it, I keep missing it. Okay, so now I have those 6 beads down at the end of my thread that I'm having issues with holding straight. Add 1 bead to your thread. What you're going to do is you're going to skip over that first bead, and then you're going to go through the second bead. This is even count peyote, by the way. And then when you pull tight, your beads should look something similar to that. So now add, excuse me, add another bead on your thread. You're coming out of that second bead. You're going to skip the next bead and go in the bead after that. And then when you pull your thread down for that, and pull tight, your beads should look something similar to this. Now you got 1 more bead to add on this row. So add 1 more bead. You're coming out of this bead right here. You're going to skip that second bead and go through the third bead. So when you get done with this portion, you should look something similar to that. Now notice how it's going that way. It's curving. It's perfectly normal. That usually happens. It will straighten out after about another row or 2. So to start your next row, you're coming out of this bead here. Now from each row on forward, it's going to be a lot easier. So add a bead. You're coming out of this one. You want to go straight through the one that's sticking out. So go through the sticky out bead. And when you do that, that puts your bead like that. Your next one, add a bead. Go through the next one that's sticking out. Now, of course, I'm going in a right-hand direction because I'm primarily right-handed. If you're left-handed, you're probably going in the other way, the other direction. Still should have something very similar. So for the last bead on this road, add a bead, and then go through your last bead that's sticking out. And then when you pull, see how it kind of straightened itself out a little bit now? Still a little curved, but it's a lot straighter than it was beforehand. Now, how do you figure out how many rows that you're on? How do you count your peyote? You can do it in a couple of different ways. The way that I typically do it, I start on one of the beads from the first row. So one of the beads that's sticking out most on the left-hand side for me, if you're right-handed and growing your peyote towards the right, it'll be on the right-hand side if you're left-handed or growing your peyote towards the left. So over here on the left-hand side for me, these beads that are sticking out, oh, my cat tried to jump up in my lap. These beads that are sticking out on the left are the ones that I'm starting to count with. So to figure out how many rows I have, count with that first bead. So that's row 1. The second bead diagonal to it is row 2. Third bead diagonal to that one is row 3. And fourth bead is over here, and that is row 4. So we're already on the 4th row. So you can count it like that. You can also count it as, here's row 1, so there's row 1. The one directly next to it is row 3. And then you have another sticky out bead over here, so that's row 4. Another way you can count it is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, whichever is best for you. What you want to do though is you want to go towards, keep growing this until you get to row 18. So go ahead and do that, and I will meet you back and show you the next step. Okay, so let's make this into a little basket. So there's my 18 rows. Again, you can count it however which way that you want to, but it's 18 rows of peyote. Now to make your basket, what you want to do is you want to pick up your form. You want to fold the two ends, kind of like a taco, together. So where you have, or a U shape or something like that, so you have it looking like that. What we'll end up doing is on this U shape, we will add beads and connect the bottom portion that we're coming out of right now to the top portion, the very first row. To do that, just add 4 beads onto your thread and needle. I'm coming out of the very last bead of the peyote. I'm going to go to the very first row and then just go through that first bead in the peyote. And then, whoops, when you pull that, that will just lay those beads on the side, just to be kind of like the side of a basket. Now, I'm flipping this around, so now the first row is facing upwards, because here's my stop thread that I started with. So that first row is facing upwards. We want to go down, and our thread's coming out of that first bead going towards me. So we want to move to the left and go away from me that direction through the next bead in line. That's directly to the left of that one. And then when you pull tight, that'll put those beads, that'll make those beads along the edge be tighter. So add 4 more. Now I'm flipping to the end of the peyote strip again. And this is the bead that we first came out of. So we're going to go to the bead directly below it, or to the left of it, and go towards, thread through it, going away from you. I'll figure out how to say it in a second. Hopefully it's making sense. So now we want to go and add our third row of the basket edge. So go directly to the left, bead to the left again, and thread your needle towards you. So that way you can go to the opposite side of the basket. Add your 4 beads. Flipping it around again. So here's the front portion, or the beginning of it. Now we have beads coming out of that first row, the second row, and then we're going to add one into the third row. And thread that going towards you. And then that puts our beads on the side to make it look like a side of a basket. So now I'm flipping this around to where that side is now towards me, because we need to get our thread and needle coming out of basically where your stop thread's coming out of. So to do that, we're just going to follow the beads on a diagonal through the peyote until we get up there to where our bead is, or our thread is coming out. It's our beginning thread. If you want to, you can always just use that beginning thread also. It's just a little short for me. I didn't leave that much of a room to be able to play with it. So that's why I'm moving my thread over that way. Now I'm going to move the thread ending out of the way so it's easier. And this is my working thread right here that's coming out to the right. Then my beginning thread is in my left hand off the left side. So we're going to add this side. So add your 4 beads. You're coming out of your first bead here. This is the beginning of your peyote again. Flipping it to where I'm at the very last row of our peyote. And I'm going through that very last bead, and I'm threading through it away from me. And then that puts your beads on the edge. Now to get to the next part, to be able to add the next row, go to the bead just to the right, thread through it going towards you. When you pull tight, that puts the thread in between the beads so you don't see it. Then add your 4 delicas. We're on the end of the peyote. I'm flipping it to now where I'm at the beginning again, and I'm going through that second bead, because here's your first bead, first row, going through the second row, and I'm threading through towards me again. That puts your second side of the basket in there. Moving to the third bead over there, adding the 4, flipping it to the back of it again, going to the next one that's open and adding that last side bead to that. Okay, so now we need to get to a point where we're going to add these portions, these long portions, long arms, so that way we can attach it to the form, to our form up here. Okay, so to do that, we're coming out of that third bead along one side of your peyote. We want to be coming out of the first bead up here going in this direction. So your first row, but you want to be going towards the 4 beads that we added for the side of the basket. So to do that, you have to kind of just think about your peyote and see which beads you can go through. So I'm coming out of that third bead. I'm going to go to the one bead that's on the left, but 1 row away. So it's a diagonal to the left. Then I'm going to go into the bead that's directly to the left of it, and so that way, that means that I'm going from, I'm sewing towards myself on that bead, directly to the left of the bead that we just came out of. Getting caught on the bead mat again. Okay. Then now we can go up through that last bead in the peyote, and then I'm going through the first 2 beads on the side. So I'm coming out in between beads 2 and 3 of the side beads that we added. And that is where we're going to add our beads to attach to our form. So I think I did 4. Let me look real quick. No, I did 5. Okay, so add 5 of your delicas. This is where you'll need your form. Pick up your form, and depending on which side that you want to start on, I'm just going to start on the left hand side. The very last 11-0 that we added in our brick stitch is where we're going to attach to. So I'm going to go through that 11-0 and just the 11-0. So it's going to be that bead right there. I'm going to go through that and pull it up close, and then your basket's closer to you. Now we're going to go straight back through those 5 delicas that we just added. See if I can do it this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, got them all. And then when you pull that, and you keep pulling, not too hard though, Don't want to mess things up. Then that is now attached to your form. Okay, so now we went through that first 2 beads of our side, so we want to go through the last 2 beads on that side. And then now your first little part of your basket is attached to your form. Okay, so my thread is actually on the back side of my basket, so I'm flipping it back over again. We need to get to the other side of the basket so we can add this other arm. Here again, just go through your peyote until you're coming out of that 1 bead. So I'm just going to go through the first 2 rows here on a diagonal, make sure that I'm not showing any extra thread or anything like that. So going on a diagonal, and then now I'm coming out, well, almost. Now I'm coming out of that very first bead. So now we want to move through our first two of the sides of the basket beads, and then come out. And then, man, this stop thread's getting in the way. Okay, so there's that. Now we're going to add our 5 beads. Man, I hope this is making sense. Okay, so 5 delicas. We're going to go through the very last 11-0 on this side in our brick stitch. Go through that 11-0. I keep getting it caught on the side of the mat. And then we're going to round through that 11-0, but then going back through those 5 delicas that we just added. It doesn't want to go through the delica. There we go. Okay, so that's 2. And then 3, 4, 5. And then you pull tight until you're comfortable with the length of your basket. And then now all you have to do is just tie off your threads. I'm not going to tie my thread off on this one at the particular point in time because I want a black basket, so that way the black one matches each other, and so I don't have one that's gray and one that's black. So I'm not going to tie it off, but that's essentially all you have to do now, is just tie off your threads. The very last thing you have to do is get your ear wire of choice. I'm using one of these today. To open these, you just take your pliers, open it off to the side so it looks like that. And then all you have to do is thread it on to your ear wire. Just make sure your front of your earring is facing frontwards. I did that by accident once. And then you twist it back to close it up. And then after you get that burned off, then you have your earrings. And then you make your second set and you have a pair. Thanks so much for watching my Soaring High Earrings tutorial. Again, if you're missing any supplies, they are listed down below in that list along with some links to PotomacBeads' website, so that way you can purchase anything that you need that you're missing. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned for the next one because I know it's going to be a good one.